How you doing, folks? Welcome back to the channel where I talk about things. It is Friday the 2nd of May, 2025. And early this morning, here in northern Israel, there was, around 5:30 in the morning local time, a siren that went off from an incoming rocket attack. And this time it was once again from the Houthis of Yemen, who shot a ballistic missile from Yemen to Israel. And apparently it traversed, once again, most of Israel, got to the north, and was intercepted by air defense systems. And the debris landed in several areas, obviously, and one of the areas it hit was a kindergarten in kibbutz, I think kibbutz Mishmar, or kibbutz Mishmar, or something like that, or Mishmar, and I don't know, somewhere. Anyway, north of Jerusalem, a bit north, in the north of the center of the country, as was reported. Those things are shot down quite high, so because they're ballistic missiles, obviously, so they're traversing great distances at pretty high altitude, and so they get shot down. I'm pretty sure not by the Iron Dome, obviously, this one, because Iron Dome is usually intended for low flying and relatively slower objects, like the rockets they shoot out of Gaza. So it typically shoots those. And I think stuff that's like, ballistic missiles typically get shot down by like the Arrow or David's Sling, things of that nature. Or if it was, significant enough reason to do it, they might shoot it down with one of the THAAD missile batteries that they have here in Israel, which is an American system that they have installed here. It's actually been here, like, there's a fun fact, if you don't know. There was actually an American base in the Negev Desert, been there for a long time, and they have missile batteries there for U.S. air defense reasons. CENTCOM, or one of those parts of the U.S. Armed Forces, has basically some forces there for its Middle East interests, and keeps missiles there in case of, whatever reasons they need to. And since October 7th, they've brought in, because of the threat from Iran, and obviously Iran attacked Israel twice with many volleys of ballistic missiles and rockets and drones and all kinds of things, direct attacks from Iran to Israel. So America actually installed 2 batteries of THAAD missiles, which are very high altitude missiles that actually shoot down the incoming missiles in space. Like, so you're talking about intercontinental ballistic missile air defense system, and they installed 2 of those systems here because of the different threats that they perceived that might be the reason to use it. I don't think they actually used them, but they have them here. Apparently, the David's Arrow or David's Sling and Arrow systems and the Iron Dome systems were enough for Israel to knock down, and also the help that Israel got from jets shooting in the air, like its own jets, and as well as jets from the Jordanian Air Force, and radar and information and other stuff like that from Iraq, even. So, yeah, even though Iraq is technically not at peace with Israel, they still provided information to Israel to help prevent damage or limit damage from the ballistic missiles coming towards Israel from Iran. So why am I mentioning all that? Well, Because even though you'd think, by the sound of the chirping birds and the sunny nature of the day and the fact that life kind of appears to go on as usual here in this part of northern Israel, um, it's still a war zone. And people should not forget that. Like, people that live here obviously know that. We are all very well aware of the fact that we live in a place where anything and everything can be a target, might be a target at some point. And, threats are all around. Right? They come in from the air from the south, they come in from the air from the north sometimes, they come in from the air from, they could be shooting at us from Yemen or Gaza or Judea or Samaria, what the Arabs call the West Bank. They could be shooting at us from Lebanon. They could be shooting at us from Syria. Um, right now in Syria, there are actually some Israeli troops stationed in posts that were abandoned by the Syrian army, creating a power vacuum. And well, when there's a power vacuum, as the old expression goes, nature abhors a power vacuum. And you know what else abhors a power vacuum? Political neighbors, right? Countries that are neighbors, they don't like a power vacuum, and there's going to be a very quick filling of that vacuum by usually the greater force or the faster force, right? And the fact is, in this case, Israel was both the greater and faster force, and it was able to take the places that were abandoned by the Alawite Syrian army. And now they have these little outposts over there. And what are they doing? They are trying to build some kind of a stronger coordination with the Druze of South Syria, right? Because the Druze in Israel are obviously fiercely loyal to Israel. The Jews in Syria are fiercely loyal to Syria. But at the moment, Syria doesn't really have a leadership, even though the HTS terrorist organization kind of is the leadership organization there now. Not really, but sort of. It's like a big hodgepodge coalition of like these terrorists, and also they have some Kurds who like came into the coalition with them because the Kurds didn't like Bashar Assad either. And, I get it, but let's not pretend like the HTS are some saints. They're definitely not. The things they've done since taking over are quite grotesque and violent. They said they wouldn't target ethnic minorities. They absolutely have. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's plenty of videos of them like forcing people to walk on their hands and knees, including little children, to crawl on their hands and knees and bark like dogs, and then they execute them. And like they make them walk up and down like whole streets, like humiliating them in the extreme. Because in their culture, that's like a humiliation, a severe humiliation. And then they just murder them right there. And they've been doing that to thousands and thousands of people, and all kinds of other horrible things. And where's the outrage? Where's the protest at Columbia University, right? Where's the protest at Harvard University for those Syrians whose lives were ended simply because they happen to be of the wrong religion? They happen to be Alawite, and the Sunni terrorists who are now in charge, who have the most guns in the country, now they suddenly have the guns, and they're brutalizing the people that used to brutalize them. So this is just revenge killings. Where's the outrage? Where's the calls of genocide? Where's all that? In like less than a few months, they killed far more Syrians of all walks of life and religions than Israel did in Gaza in the same amount of time during the beginning of this war. So it's absolutely hypocritical. There's a double standard at play once again, where Israel is the only country in the Middle East that gets, accused of bad things when literally all of its neighbors are doing things that are as bad or worse 10 times over. But no, Israel's the one that gets accused of doing the bad things. It's just the double standards and the hypocrisy are never ending in the Middle East. Um, People ask me sometimes, why do you mix discussions of politics on your channel where you talk about marketing and technology and crypto and trading and stuff? Listen, this is my personal channel, so I put whatever I feel like on it. And nobody's forcing you to watch this. And there's things in the world that people don't always talk about, or things that people do talk about, but from different perspectives. And I'm going to give you my perspective based in reality, based in facts, as I see them, and well, based in facts, not as I see them. Facts are facts. And I feel that a lot of the time, the facts do not get covered well in the various channels that cover these topics that have much bigger followings. And no, I don't really want to sit here and be a quote unquote, YouTuber, as we say, and make like a dedicated channel that just grows, for the purpose of just having a large following or whatever, and bring you only one echo chamber of one little thing. That's just not who I am. It's never been who I am. I'm not going to be your one topic specialist on my personal channel. Now, do I have channels that are one topic specialties? Sure. You don't have my name on them. They don't have anything about me on them, right? There's other people on them. You wouldn't know it was me if you watched all the videos or if you checked out all the information about them, because they're not connected visually, right? But and those do all the silly things that YouTube likes, to grow and to get more and all that stuff. But this is my personal channel, and I talk about all kinds of stuff. Usually topics that I have an interest in or want to just say something about. Where I have some knowledge in the topic, not just ranting about stuff I don't know anything about. But so what's going on where I'm living is we have the Israeli army on the defensive against no less than 7 hostile borders, or several hostile fronts, as we call them. Again, Iran, Yemen, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Judea, Samaria, and even parts of Iraq that are shooting at us, like Islamic State people in Iraq. And sometimes they sneak into parts of Jordan, but mostly they're attacking us from Iraq with, threats, and occasionally, like one or two, they'll shoot a rocket. Usually won't even make it to Israel, but they'll shoot a rocket. They'll try to get it over Jordan and make it land in Israel. So we have threats all around us. And so what is Israel doing in Syria right now? Well, Israel, among other things, just shot at targets near, not at, but near the palace of the president, or the presidential palace in Damascus. Of this, where the new president, who now goes by the name Shara, lives, right, or spends his time as president. He used to go by the name Jolani, which is like Golani, but in his version of Arabic. When that was like his nom de guerre, his war name, right? But now that he's not a fighter anymore, now that he's a respectable president of some country, interim president of some country, he goes by the name Shara, his last name, whatever that means. Like whatever reason it is, but they have a nom de guerre and then they have a political name after when they rise to power. Typical thing that happens in politics. And it's another way of creating a kind of a fake distance between himself and his past, which is, very bloody, and in the most horrific ways. And nevertheless, even with his new name, like I said, he has led massive massacres, or he is, his forces have conducted massive, horrible massacres against innocent people throughout Syria, especially in the Alawite areas. But also, they've been trying to attack the Druze minority. And if you know anything about The Druze, you'll know that they're tough. A very small minority, but very strong, and you don't mess with them. They will fight back as hard as they can. They are extremely loyal to the country they live in, but when the country they live in is in a state of flux and they don't know exactly who to be loyal to, they are loyal to themselves, first of all. And they always are, but they're extremely loyal to themselves, especially when there isn't a clear and obvious leader of their country, or that leader is trying to harm them. They will defend themselves, as they've done against the Hezbollah in Lebanon, as they've done against whoever has tried to mess with them. Here in Israel, they're a highly respected minority. I mean, they're a minority. Like all minorities, they have equal rights. Here, like all people in Israel, they have equal rights. All citizens have equal rights, and they are, in fact, one of the they are the largest minority that is actually required to serve in Israel. Right? Jews are required to serve in the military in Israel. Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, they're not required to serve. They can. There aren't that many Shias, but the Sunnis are not required to serve, although some do. The Druze Muslims are required to serve. And boy, do they ever. They are amazing soldiers. And they, by the way, the reason that they're required to serve is not to be a burden to them. It's a matter of pride for them that they want to serve, because they are extremely proud and fiercely loyal to the country that they live in, like I said. So they actually want to serve, right? For them, it's a matter of pride. If they didn't serve, they would feel like we were denying them a privilege or a right that everybody else gets to have, right? By the way, that's a right that people say often, well, the Arabs don't have the exact same equal rights as the Jews in Israel. And I say, well, like, for what? So they say, well, the right of return. Yeah, Arabs don't have the right of return in Israel. Correct, even if they're Israeli Arabs. You know why? Because of demographics. But the trade-off is Israeli Arabs don't have to serve in the army. Okay? They can if they want, but they are not required to, because we're not going to force people to potentially fight against their own brothers and sisters, especially if it's against their cultural ethos to do it, unlike the Druze, who don't have a problem fighting against, like in a war, God forbid, if there was Druze fighting against Druze, like on the Syrian-Israeli border, or the Syrian-Lebanese border, or the Lebanese-Israeli border, right? They would fight against each other, and they have, and they do, and they don't view it as any kind of betrayal, because they are, even though their family serving different government interests at the time, and they just accept that as a fact of life. Okay, and so in their culture, it's okay to serve the army of the country you live in, regardless of whether or not you might have to face against other Druze from other countries who might literally be in your family, right? And that's just part of their culture, right? They're a very interesting group of people, like I said, and they are amazing. There are Israeli Druze who are in all kinds of units in the army, from everything from logistics and maintenance to mechanics to infantry to tanks to the Air Force. There's in fact an Israeli Druze fighter pilot. You guys, if you ever watch, there's this channel, this guy Mansour. I highly recommend it. He's a Druze Israeli Arab. He actually was in special forces in Israel, and he shows the point of view of a Druze living in Israel. And he often speaks with interesting people from his community, and also not from his community. He brings you information about Israel and the Middle East. I highly recommend it. Mansour, check him out. And he speaks about the Druze community often from, and he is Druze, so he has quite a lot of insight about what it's like to be Druze in Israel. And you can hear him say exactly why this country, why Israel is amazing, because it gives equal rights. It gives the most rights to the people that in any other country would be oppressed. If he was born just a few miles across the border, in Syria or Lebanon, he would be oppressed.
Yes, they have Jews there. No, they don't always suffer every second of the day. But generally speaking, they're not having their best life in Syria or Lebanon.
Compared to Israel, where they're absolutely living, in fairness and equality, with the opportunities that they just would not have, not far from here in Lebanon or Syria. So anyway, that's gonna do it for now, folks. Hope you're all doing well. Peace and love, and yeah, catch you later. Cheers.